Now we are recording. So we'll run through quickly the goals for today. As you know, today is centered around member suspensions and exits and everything that falls in with those. We want to give you an overview of what the different types of suspensions and exits are. Really, I think we're going to be diving more deeply into the language of it all, because depending on where you are, where you could be in Encore and e-grants or dealing with corporation or us, seems to be that we all have a little bit different language to describe essentially the same thing, so we'll hopefully clear that up. We also want to run through the suspension and exit process. Make sure that everyone's very clear on each particular type of exit or suspension based on what we clearly defined beforehand, what those steps that each program director, program manager, people at your level should be doing. And that won't result in any questions from us when we come and monitor afterwards. And then lastly, I hope to get into, if time allows, some more deeper level details along with some situational examples. I invite you also to ask questions based on situational examples if you have those. Seeing a hand raised. Donna has her hand raised. Donna, if you have a question, I will unmute you now if you'd like to speak.
I don't have my hand raised.
Oh, okay. Well, I lowered your hand. Now
okay. Thank you.
Great. And so, yeah, and we'll have some polls as well. So diving right in into the situational examples. First off, so we're going to focus the beginning parts of this webinar on suspension and then dive into exits a little bit later. One of the, I guess, depending on your program, some folks use the disciplinary suspensions more than others. Not all suspensions are created equal, as you might have guessed. For disciplinary suspensions, the programs must suspend members facing official charges for violent felonies or for selling or distributing controlled substances. Also, members that are convicted of possession of controlled substances are required to be suspended for disciplinary purposes. Eventually, this member can be reinstated into service if the results of those charges, they're eventually found not guilty or those charges are dismissed. Also, if an AmeriCorps member has those charges and is unable to complete their term of service, so say they were suspended for a very long period of time, towards the end of the year, for example, and they're not able to finish their term, you can exit them for, they're eligible for a partial award, essentially a CPC exit, as long as they're cleared of those charges. On the other hand, if you have a member who's convicted of those criminal charges, as I described, they must be released from the program for cause as soon as those become formalized. Outside of those charges, members may also be suspended for not upholding the standards of the contract that you have outlined. This is where you have a lot more leeway in determining what those disciplinary reasons for suspension might be. You can support, you can make a stronger claim for a disciplinary suspension if you're clearly describing the reasons in a member contractor agreement what are some of the reasons that a member might get suspended for disciplinary reasons. If some reasons that programs have used in the past include member performance or attendance. On top of that, in relation to disciplinary reasons outside of suspension, the FAQs, the national policy FAQs, which I'll link to in the next slide, talk about imposing minor or fines on members for minor disciplinary problems, as long as that's outlined in the member agreement, of course. If I'm not familiar with imposing fines, and I'm not familiar with any of my programs in my portfolio doing that. So if you're interested in doing that as a part of way to encourage member performance, I would first refer back to those national policy FAQs, as I mentioned, and of course, ask your program officer. In addition, the compelling personal circumstance, usually we're familiar with that for exits. I'll save a lot of that, the reasons behind a compelling personal circumstance exit for when we get into exits in a little bit more detail. And then more recently, we actually heard from CNCS that we were under the assumption that there's really these two categories, disciplinary and CPC. But we've heard from CNCS recently that there's many more reasons that a member can be suspended that don't fit into those two categories. So the two that I'm mentioning here are 0 hours in a pay period. If a member is not serving any hours, of course, the preference is to always have members be serving some hours in a pay period. If for whatever reason that's not possible, the member should be suspended. And we've detailed that in the PD handbook if you have more questions about that. And then also in the grievance procedures that are outlined by the corporation, they also talk about a member who files a grievance. They may be suspending if that's appropriate, depending on what sort of grievance they're filing. So diving a little bit more deeper into disciplinary reasons for suspension, as I mentioned, it's really those folks who are facing charges for those reasons mentioned in this slide here, the top point. Those are the specific causes that the National Policy FAQ, which is when we post these slides, those will be clickable links mentioned in specific. And then also the fines. And here once again, just in case folks are looking for more information on 0 hours in a pay period, you can refer to the PD handbook for that. Okay, the process. So first topic for deciding if it's appropriate to suspend a member. Oops, looks like something came up. If you're deciding whether to suspend a member, you need to decide if that's appropriate and decide which category that would fit under. And then just one moment, sorry here. Okay. And then from that, you'll want to notify your PO of the suspension. For those, when you're notifying a program officer, we were just talking among staff, I think it would be reasonable for you, when you're doing that, to just provide an explanation of why the suspension is happening and what the situation is, a little bit of detail there. you want to, if the suspension is going to be happening in the near future, or you're hoping to have it occur that day, detail what day that suspension will begin. And then lastly, just to note your expected reinstatement date for the member. Some programs don't know exactly when that might take place, but give your best estimate. It'll give us a sense of what we need to do to follow up with you, and also will be probably the question most program officers will ask if you don't provide that. Then comes sort of the hard part in some regards of suspending the member in Encore and e-grants. Depending on how in Encore, you can simply do that under the member's profile. And the last point, referring to the last point on the slide here, on Encore timesheets. So once you suspend your member in Encore, none of those timesheets will be created because the member is suspended, so that makes sense. And then once the member comes back, those timesheets will automatically generate. One way you can handle that is once those timesheets come back up again, instead of having just open timesheets in Encore with 0 hours, you could easily just put a note in there detailing the suspension, why the member was suspended in the timesheet, have that submitted and approved, and then there won't be any questions about a 0-hour timesheet in that regard, because then we know the member was suspended for that time. Document is the next step in the process. That's broad, but I think really here what I'm getting at is you documenting the reasons behind the suspension in a way that it makes it clear to an outside reviewer why the member is being suspended, and and some of the decision-making processes that you went through to decide to suspend the member. Especially if this is for disciplinary purposes, I think you'll want to have a clear description of some of the issues that were at hand that led to a suspension, because in some cases you may be having a suspension that eventually leads to straight to an exit. So in those cases, it's good to have all of that documentation in place before it might be hard to get a hold of the member. Then comes notification of the National Service Trust, and I guess these don't necessarily follow in a particular order, but there's a stipulation in the provisions that require the National Service Trust be notified within 30 days of suspension, and that the way in which the National Service Trust is being notified is through the portal. So as long as you're conducting that suspension and e-grants, you're fulfilling that requirement in the terms and conditions. And then depending on a few different factors, you will have to adjust the benefits of the member that is under suspension, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So the two main things that you'll have to be looking out for changing benefits while a member is suspended are living allowance, health care, and child care. The FAQs state that for the living allowance, the members who are the national policy FAQs, that is, members who are suspended for minor disciplinary reasons may not receive a living allowance for the suspended period. And that's for the entire period. So you'd be looking at, if you're paying a biweekly living allowance, that suspension would have to cover the entirety of that biweekly period. If a member is suspended for part of a pay period and they're serving some hours in that pay period, they should be paid the living allowance for that period. Next is healthcare and childcare. Interestingly, there's a decent amount of guidance that the corporation has put out in regards to this. They first come in the terms and conditions, section 7F, and the National Policy FAQ D5. Those say similar things but have some differences in it. And they essentially state that you have to be notifying those providers or corporation designated agents immediately when a member's status changes, such that it affects their eligibility for child care or health care. So not all suspensions are affecting the member's status enough to require those providers to be notified. So then it goes on to say that suspending members for cause for lengthy periods or indefinite periods of time are examples that they give for reasons that you would need to notify those providers. And I think I underlined in my notes the cause piece of that. So if you have a member that's suspended for compelling personal circumstance, that may be a health reason. Certainly, I don't think the provisions or the FAQs are trying to have a member have their health care or child care benefits changed or removed given while they're in a health-related situation. Pausing to take a look at questions. Let's see, and in relation to child care, the terms and conditions also say similar things for that, cause, reasons. But it is more specific in the terms and conditions about child care, that it must occur in, well, it says the corporation, they must notify the corporation immediately in writing when a member status changes. And then it goes on to say that after 5 days, the recipient will be liable for any erroneous payments. So for child care, there's more specific timelines there noted. Any questions on that? I'll pause for just a second. Okay. So some things to consider while members are on suspension. You'll want to be staying in regular communication with your members. This is probably not new to you, but I think it's more of a best practice, something the corporation recommends as well, that you're, especially if we're talking about a case of indefinite suspension, don't want members to just forget about their service commitments. Of course, you do not want to be allowing or approving any hours while a member is on suspension. This seems really simplistic, but I had a case where I had to remove some hours last year because I found out a member was suspended, but when they came back, Encore generated those timesheets. Member was saying, well, I was doing some service while I was on suspension and logged those hours, and the program just didn't compare that and didn't realize that that was the period in which the member was suspended. So be careful with that. That's why those notes will be helpful in the Encore timesheet saying member was suspended from this time to this time, just to make sure that no hours are being logged during those time periods. And then lastly, if you haven't already established a return date with reinstatement date with the member, to be doing that as soon as possible. That will give them something to look forward to and something for you to tell your program officer. As it's reading through, when I was preparing for this webinar, there was a lot of guidance that the corporation, especially in cases where in suspension, some of their guidance can be a little bit vague. And generally, in dealing with the corporation, in my experience, when they tend to be vague, they tend to offer that the clarity comes through program-specific policies. So some things that came out of my digging in suspensions and exits for you to consider for suspensions are a policy, or at least some clauses in the member contract that provide you the flexibility to terminate a member directly from suspension. You may feel like your member agreement does that already, but some specific language in there might make it a little bit stronger. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just the decision-making process that you might be going through, so that it's clear to the members and any future people who are fulfilling your roles. What are the reasons members are typically suspended for? And that's all spelled out really clear in the member agreement or separate policies. Great. So one of the things that comes out of a suspension is that you can extend a member's term of service with some stipulations, right? It's if you plan, so you can, without amendment to your grant contract with Serve Wisconsin, and hopefully it's clear in your member agreement that you can do this as well, that you can extend a member's term of service past their contract end date, so long as it doesn't go past your grant contract end date. So let's say your member contract ends in July 15th, but your contract with us, Serve Wisconsin, goes to August 14th. Members suspended for 2 weeks, and you want to give them the option to serve those extra 2 weeks. As long as that's clear in your member agreement that you can do that, have them serve that extra 2 weeks without amendment to that contract. Or if it's not specifically noted in there, make an amendment for those 2 weeks. I'm referencing Grant Contract Article 5 because that states that your grant contract with Serve Wisconsin, this is a reference to all programs general contract with us, that the performance period, which is talking about essentially the contract period, that end date may be extended without amendment to the contract, so long as there's an approval of a no-cost extension, and that no-cost extension is being requested due to one or more AmeriCorps members being on suspension. And then it goes on to say that, and I'm mentioning it there, that the no-cost extension must be for December 31st or the length of the longest period of suspension. And whichever is shorter out of that period. So some things to note here specifically is December 31st is the hard end date. So if you have a suspension that is very long, say 5 months long, and you're hoping to extend the member into February of next year, under our grant contract, that is not allowable. But you can request up to December 31st, so long as there's that long period of suspension that allows you to do that. If the suspension doesn't get you up until that time period, then it goes till the end of that. The no-cost extension is a tricky term that we always actually scratch our heads with on the corporation, where the no cost comes from, because you are allowed to cover member support costs. So say you have that living allowance that wasn't paid to the member while they were on suspension, you can go ahead and do that and request that as reimbursement. Or for fixed programs, you can invoice those. So then when you're going through and requesting a no-cost extension, some of the things that I look for with my programs is names of the members that you intend on having serve past the grant contract end date because of their suspensions, to detail the length of their suspensions that the members have served or member, and then lastly the length of the no-cost extension that you're requesting. Seeing a few questions come in. Looks like Amy is answering those in the chat box as I go along. If we can address any questions that seem relevant to the whole group at the end, maybe. Question from Steve is, to clarify, it's not required that we extend a member's service if they are suspended. Correct. This is certainly, an option available to you. As I mentioned earlier, even members that are on suspension can be exited directly from suspension. You can work with the member to complete their term of service in their regular contract time that you had originally set out to do. These are just an option given the suspension. Looks like some good questions. Thanks for your engagement throughout this. I did want to do a poll. So now that we went through some no-cost extensions, wanted to see if we conveyed this point clearly. And I am going to open a poll now. And it should show up on your screen, and you can just click one of those answers. I'll give you, maybe 5-10 seconds to do this. No harm here. Just pick an answer what you feel is appropriate. Seeing those votes roll in now. Looks like we got half of the folks who have done so. Thank you. Alrighty, maybe that's all we're going to get. All right, closing that poll and sharing. So you should be able to see the results of those now. Yes, a few different answers here. I guess the correct answer here, what I had intended, would be December 31st. The idea is that given a no-cost extension, the longest that a member may serve, if you're granted the longest no-cost extension, is ultimately to December 31st. So in this case, if you're having a 2015-2016 member who would have been on suspension and you requested a no-cost extension for now, that could have only gone up to, at the latest, December 31st. Thanks. Alrighty. Moving on to exits. Member exits, I think, are a little simpler in some regards. Some of the complexity in this is language, as I mentioned at the beginning. Here, this is actually a, oh, okay. I've been notified that something is blocking the screen. Let's see. Sorry. Oh, there, that's better. Okay. So the types of member exits, going back to that, at the top row here we have our member who's successfully completed. So in the column you'll see a series of questions that help us determine what type of exit this will be. So if a member successfully completes, they obviously have to serve through their contract end date. They have to meet all of the hours requirements that are detailed in their member agreement, and they must perform satisfactorily. That allows them to successfully complete, get their full ed award, and be eligible for future terms of service. The second row is our cause exit. And bear with me as I go through some terminology here. Just for now, I'm going to follow the terminology that is listed in the exit type column of this table. So if this sounds unfamiliar to you, I might know why. So if the member serves through the contract end date, they don't meet their hours requirement, so they served 350 out of their 450 hour slot, but did a great job, just weren't, because of other commitments, couldn't make it their cause exit, but are eligible for future years of service. They don't get an ed award. Then moving on is compelling personal circumstance. Those members serve satisfactorily. There's some specific reasons why folks are exited for CPC that I'll go through in a bit. But the main difference between them and cause exits, as you know, is that they're eligible for a partial award. And then just wanted to show you the distinction between some of the cause exits at the fourth and fifth rows here at the bottom. You'll see the main difference here is whether the member is serving satisfactorily on those two. That's the difference between those two cause exits at the bottom. The difference between the second row exit and the others is that the member in the second row serves through the entirety of their contract term. So someone who serves, if their member contract is from August to August, they serve that whole time period, but they just didn't meet their hour requirements. Some people get confused by this, that if a member serves their entirety of the service term through their contract end date, that they are just not finishing, not completing successfully. But for e-grants purposes, how the education award is given out, that's all of a cause exit. So don't confuse yourself. Okay, so this table looks much the same. We changed out the two last columns in the table. And in eGrants, if you are using some reports, you'll notice that it divides most of the members up based on their award status. So you'll see enrolled, like earning an award, earned an award, did not earn an award, are the main categories. And then under that, they'll see that their status will show you, like for the successful completion one, they're completed. So whenever we see earned an award, ended service early, that tells us it's compelling personal circumstance because they earned an award, and the only way you can end service early and earn an award is through compelling personal circumstance. Conversely, if you did not earn an award and you ended service early, that tells you that it's a cause exit. So eGrants is really only making those two distinctions for early exits, while successful completion will show you earned an award completed. To complicate matters, AmeriCorps has 4 labels when you are going through and exiting members. So once you're all finished and you're trying to change their status, you'll see the options for successfully completed, compelling personal circumstance, cause, or without cause. And here in this table, this is actually new to me in some regards, the distinction between cause and without cause, but it is important to note and is done in this table. So the main distinction, as I understand it, is that without cause is essentially noting that the member performed satisfactorily, that they're still being exited early, and that they're not eligible for an award, but the fact that they performed satisfactorily would put them into that without cause AmeriCorps label category. And then that is shown at the bottom of the table, that AmeriCorps label, where it shows member did not perform satisfactorily, they ended early, are not eligible for an award, and that is a cause exit. Hope that came through clearly. Great. Just peeking at my notes. So again, repeat here, but didn't get to mention the last point in this slide, that the position is only eligible to be refilled when a member is exited for cause if the member has served less than 30% of his or her term. This is different than compelling personal circumstance, so note that. Compelling personal circumstances. So I haven't had the opportunity today to call your attention to our handouts that are on this webinar today, but if you haven't noticed it, it is in our GoToWebinar software. There's 5 handouts that I've uploaded to this. Amy has done some help in updating a few of these, and she might call attention to those when she's going through them. But I wanted to pull up one in particular, and that is a flowchart that is actually on Wigio. See if I can get it up there. Okay, the flowchart. Here it is. So this is going to be a helpful resource for you if you're ever looking to determine more clearly what members are exited under. Also, it does a good job of referencing the law in specific. These are the reasons that I mentioned earlier why a member might be exited for compelling personal circumstance specifically. In addition, on the right-hand side of this, it shows you why a member cannot be exited for compelling personal circumstance. So they cannot be exited for compelling personal circumstance to enroll in school. Employment is one of those ifs that Amy will go into a little bit more. So this is on there and also on Wikio. All right. And now you're seeing stars. Okay, back on it. The one thing that I want to specifically mention is that in the FAQs, they talk about pregnancy and childbirth being, and in the law in some places, talking about how it could potentially be determined to be compelling personal circumstance for an exit if they prevent a member from completing a term of service. Same as that, like I mentioned, a lot of these reasons apply for suspension as well. To be exited for CPC, the member must have served 15% of their term. And unlike the cause exit, the exit that a member is not eligible for an award and ended service early, that slot, that member position that the member was serving in, if they're exited for CPC, is not eligible for a refill. So Amy, would you like to take it over on exits for employment?
Yep, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. So CPC exits, this one is a big topic for people. I know there's been some questions that have come out recently, especially if your program is able to do this or if you are not able to do this. And I will tell you by and large that if you don't know if you can exit one of your members for compelling personal circumstances for employment, you probably can't. This does have to be something that is written into your program design and has been approved as one of the primary objectives of your program. So it can't be just something that is a byproduct of your program, but it has to be a primary objective of your program. So in order to be able to use CPC exit for employment, and you have it approved in your program design, it has to be an acceptable employment opportunity, meaning that it's not any job, but that it is in line with their career goals. Because this is a primary part of your program, you will have known what their career goals are. And so you're allowing an exit that is really advancing them. We don't want to see members going from doing meaningful community service to, say, delivering pizzas or something, because ideally that's not one related to the training you've been providing them or advancing really their career. So, so it has to be acceptable or an advancement in their career goals. This kind of exit does require consultation and permission from your program officer. So whoever your program officer is, you do have to let us know and get approval for that. And even before you can do that, your member has to let you know, let the PD know that they have an offer that has been made. And so they need to consult with, your member needs to consult with you before they can accept this employment opportunity. It cannot be done retroactively to be approved for compelling personal circumstances. So unfortunately, we have seen members where this could have been approved if they would have just told you about it in advance. Unfortunately, if we don't have that advance notice, it is not acceptable. So once you are aware of the job opportunity, you will contact your program officer. The program officer, by and large, if it's in line with your program goals, if it's an advancement in their career, they'll go ahead and approve that. And then what you'll need to do is they do need to have a written agreement. It's a special kind of form, and a sample is one of the handouts. So there's a sample certification form. I believe it's the employment CPC form. So this form that the member and program both have to sign and date will just state that the member knows they're leaving their term of service early to take a job that's advancing their career. They need to know that they are only eligible for part of their education award, as follows with other CPC exits. They also need to know that they have to have completed at least 15% of their hours. So you can't exit anyone for CPC, whatever it is, unless they complete that 15%. And then they need to know that if for some reason this new job doesn't work out, they may or may not be able to come back and serve with your program. That's going to be dependent a lot on you, if you want to have them back in that year or in the future, and also if you have any vacant spots. But because they are being exited for compelling personal circumstance, they would be eligible for future service. Ideally, because this is a career advancing job, we won't see that really because they're going to be moving on to bigger and other things. And then as always, you need to keep this documentation in the member's file. It does need that certifying document does need to be signed and dated by both the program and the member, and it will need to be in that member's file. I know I have a bunch of programs that do this, and I've been really pleased with all of your processes and how you make this happen. So just make sure that you're following the guidance. And another one of the handouts is the guidance memo for employment on compelling personal circumstance exit. So other programs, if this is something you're thinking about in your design, you're going to want to check out that guidance memo. And just remember that this needs to be a primary objective of your program. And most importantly, the corporation doesn't necessarily use this very often or approve these components of programs because AmeriCorps is not designed to be a job training program. AmeriCorps is all about direct service to communities and providing opportunities for them. So just know that to be a primary program design, it is difficult to get this approved and allowed. If there's any questions on exits for employment, please feel free to either type them in the questions box or chat box, or you can email me personally with any questions. That's all I got on that.
Great, thank you. Much better coming from your mouth than mine, so thank you for doing that. Lastly, just to run through the process with the few minutes we have, I want to save some time for questions, so I'll go through this fast. You must have an end-of-term evaluation for all of your members. This is an absolute must, regardless of the slot type or exit. The National Service Trust exit form, that is referring to paper forms that the corporation has largely phased out now. You should only be using these if you have been granted explicit permission to do so. If not, don't worry about them. You're doing them electronically, and that comes through the My AmeriCorps portal exit form. One of the common problems we see with the My AmeriCorps portal exit form is not usually when members are successfully completing or serving the entirety of their service term. It's when their members exiting early and they cannot locate the exit form in eGrants. The problem with this is that usually this is automatically, well, eGrants will automatically make available at the end of the member's term of service the My AmeriCorps portal exit form and put members into pending enrollments automatically. The way it determines that automatic process is it'll initiate the pending exit in the form 30 days before the member is expected to end. And eGrants is determining the expected end date to be 1 year from when the member starts. So if a member starts in February, it'll expect the member to end in February of next year, which is obviously not reasonable. So you'll have to manually open the exit form for them. The way in which you can do this is actually CNCS put out a pretty simple Word document with some screenshots detailing how you can manually unlock the member exit form. We've also attached that as a handout to today's webinar, and it is also on Wigio. Highly encourage you to check that one out. That is a great specific piece of guidance for you. And let's see. We talked about how you should be documenting cases for which you might be exiting a member. You might want to be providing some context of the challenges that the program was facing to retain the member if you're exiting early for disciplinary reasons, any attempts that you made to remedy the situation, that sort of thing. Let's see. Obviously, you should be exiting a member e-grants and contacting your program officer. If there also is if you're wondering on how to exit a member in e-grants more fully, there's the Embracing e-grants presentation on Wikio that you can refer to. I'll save the next few minutes for questions. We'll make available. Sorry, go ahead.
This is Amy, and I just want to add two things. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the question box, or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. I just want to give two quick updates before people start jumping off. First, regarding these webinars we've done all year, you'll receive in about an hour a survey to ask you how this particular one was. Please do fill that out. We are tracking this data. And you may remember last December, January, we had you fill out a pre-survey, a big survey that we use to inform the content of these webinars. This is directly linked to our commission support grant. It's actually our performance measure for our commission support grant, and you are all familiar with those and the data needed to track on those. So in about a day or so, you're going to receive the post survey for similar to what you did last year. It has been reduced, and we're only asking questions on things that we did webinars on. So it is far reduced, but we definitely need that data. So you'll get it either later today or tomorrow, and we're going out until January 10th. So the turnaround's a little shorter. The sooner you can get that data to us, we'll be very, very grateful. But please do, that one is required. So we're going to keep hounding you until we get your information in. So at least one person from each program or agency. If you're a Marshfield or Boys and Girls Club of Milwaukee, you can do one. It may behoove you to have multiple people do it if you think it's relevant. So, but at least one person from each agency. Please do that. And also, a reminder went out on Wikio that by December 31st, every agency needs to have at least one person complete the National Service Criminal History Check e-course. There is a link on Wikio for that. You get a certificate once you complete that. That has to be kept in your in your files. We will be monitoring for that this spring, so we're going to ask to see it. So keep it in your member file, and also, if you want, you can just email it to your program officer. I know I asked my programs to do that. That way I already have it. I know you've done it. It'll save time in the spring and any headaches if they go missing. So you'll still be required to keep it on your files. Two questions. Donna, thanks for the reminder about the exit forms. You cannot unlock the whole core at once, unfortunately, so sorry. You do have to do each individually. We can keep hounding them and letting them know that feedback, but thanks for the reminder, Donna. And on Wikio, there was a question, where can you find the webinar playbacks after Wikio? There is a folder. If you open your Wikio, you have 3 tabs at the top, a feed, a folder, and a calendar tab. You'll go to the folder tab, and it's under webinar recordings, and they are sorted by each month. And so the recordings will be, there will be a link to the recordings on Wikio. And Casey is showing you on the screen right now where you can find those webinar recordings.
While I'm doing this, well, this is the folder here now, Steve, and for anyone else interested, this is just this is our first starting folder, and then unlike where most of our things are in program resources, the webinar recordings are in their own folder. So
And
all of the
Steve
ones
just clarified too, he's asking after WIGIO leaves us in January. We are working with on the national level. You all got that information when WIGIO is disappearing at a mystery time in the nearish future. We're working on the national level to find a replacement. You will definitely be notified where that will be, what platform we'll be using. All of this information will transfer to that new platform. We don't have it yet. In the meantime, we do, a lot of these are actually linked out through our Google Docs page, so we will make sure that you have access to it if there's a brief period where we don't have a folder on WIGIO where you can just get it when you want it. Let your program officer know you're looking for the recording on, say, Exits, and we will send you a link.
Great. Amy, I just wanted to pull up one last thing on the presentation. Here I had a July 15th deadline for the survey. That's out of date. Would you reminding folks again when the survey is due back?
For the survey that you're going to get in an hour is just about this December webinar on suspensions and exits. That if you could get done by the end of the week, that would be ideal. It's like three or four questions, so super fast. And then the big survey, which I will probably wait until tomorrow just so there's not as much confusion, the bigger one, not that big, will be due January 10th, and that information will be both in the email you receive and on the SurveyMonkey survey you receive.
Yep, so if you want to provide some feedback on how this webinar was, if you didn't like my rambling on, then do that today. Wait for the more general feedback tomorrow. That will be about the more broad year-long impact that these webinars have made. So I think that's all I have. Anything else from, I'm not seeing any other further questions. So we'll go ahead and end unless you have anything else, Amy. Sorry.
I thought I saw someone typing. I just want to make sure if anybody. I don't have anything. Thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow if you're coming to the board meeting.
Take care. Happy holidays, everyone.
Stay warm. Seattle.